Let me get rid of this. Okay. Oh my goodness. What we have a line of sight receiver to a repeater, and during rain, sometimes it doesn't work very well. And that's what happened today. Okay, so as I was saying, if everybody can see my cursor over here, that is the masking, main masking button you push. And I'm trying to catch up with not being overwhelmed by everything and calm myself down, so bear with me. So new this year, as I mentioned, was a select subject, select sky. And the brush, the linear gradient, radio, color range, and luminance have been there in the past, but now they've added mask function. So as you use these different selection tools, you will be able to see a mask, and I'll show you that in a minute. And what I want to do is just go through each of these tools first. And I'm just going to use this image one I originally was going to use. I'm going to switch to this one. Okay, so I want to start with the brush. So what I'm doing is I'm going to brush. And so it brings up another dialog, which is the size. You can change the size of your brush. You can see that. And also the feathering is the second line down, and that increases how much feathering you want, or if you want a really hard edge, which I almost never use. Flow and density, I got my wrong glasses. Okay, I'm gonna do it this way. Flow and density. Flow is essentially, if you think about a paintbrush or a pen, how hard you're pressing down on that. That is flow, and I'll demonstrate that. Density is like having a governor on a car. It's going to only let you put in as much essentially ink as we're allowing. You can go up to 100% density and flow, which is your hardest line. We got our feathering down, size up. So you can see when you have your flow and density, it's a really hard line as far as how dense it is. I'm going to make one little change here. On any of these brushes, you can change what the overlay looks like. And explain overlay, you can change the color and the opacity. I'm going to opacity way up so that we can see what's happening. So I'm going to go up to mask and delete that. Okay, so we select our brush, and then you select the size you want. And so you can see that is a pretty hard line because we have the flow all the way up and the density all the way up. Now, if we bring the flow down to 50% and the density, you'll see that it's much lighter. And what flow also allows you to do is to layer. So that was one, and I pushed again. So you can kind of feather in your mask as you're going along. You can also, if you want a really hard line like that, or if you want a really soft line, you move the feathering all the way to 100%. And so it's much softer in how you're presenting your mask. I promised myself I wasn't going to talk too fast, but we're running out of time. So if I'm talking too fast, tell me, slow down, Rick. So that's, I'm going to go to the mask and delete it. The second one is a linear gradient. And what that one does is allows you to have a gradient going from dark to light. And again, if you wanted to change the color of it, you just hit this little colored box. You can go red. Also, you can change the look of it. This is a color overlay. And this is available on all of these tools. So these three little dots, you click on it. And so you can do overlay over a black and white. You can do image on black and white. There's just different ways for you to have a different look. Black over white is traditionally what you would see in a mask if you went into Photoshop. And the concept is white reveals and dark hides or conceals the what your mask is. My personal preference on these is the color overlay. Okay, so so the next tool.
Give an example of how you would use that mask.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's talk about that. You know, we're going to go through all these masks. I just want to do an overview, but what I want to do is actually get into each image and then show you how I use them. And when I do that, we can go through all the little details.
So Rick, I've got some background noise. Is that in your area?
Yeah, that's Arlo.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
They're going to call Arlo the cutest little Scotty you've ever seen in your life.
Okay.
All right. So, let's do it. I talked about these interesting things called select sky and select subject. So let's do that. Okay, the first one up here, again, you hit this panel to bring everything down, is select subject. So in this case, I have a picture of a hawk, which is, I'm going to guess that Lightroom's going to pick that as the main subject. So I'm going to hit that button. It's working, as you can see, refining results. And it did select it. So you guys can see in green how it's selected. I'm going to go to a lighter green. Lighter green would work. Oh, that's much better. So it selected this subject. So what does that mean? Well, it means that anything that I do on these major sliders is going to only affect that bird and this branch here if I decide to keep that. So let's go ahead and see if we can improve this a little bit. Okay, so at any time you can turn the overlay off or on. Right now I'm going to turn it off. So now as I move the sliders over, let's hit exposure. You can see it brings it up and it only affects the bird, which is really cool. This one had a lot of shadows in it. Of course, that's way too much there. So anyway, you kind of play with your sliders. And these are just the general sliders you always use. Read in advanced classes, I'm showing you how to use these different selection tools. So I'm going to go to 100%. Where'd you go? I'm gonna go back to it. It's funny using somebody else's computer, even if it's the same one. I'm gonna go ahead and up this puppy so that we can see it much closer. Okay, so we've already done some improvements already. And if you want to see your improvements, you can go to your mask and there's a little eyeball here. And so you can turn it off and on, see how you're affecting your image through these adjustments. So what I would probably do is increase the clarity and the dehaze, bring the texture up a little bit. And so what's neat now is I can go create a new mask, which is right up here. And I'm going to select subject again. So he says, why would you do that? Because there's a really cool tool, and I'll show you right now. Okay, mask 2. You go to the 3 dots here, and it says invert. So if I push invert, it's going to select everything except the bird. Turn my map back on. So now, essentially, I'm using the same mask, just inverting it, so I can affect just everything except the bird. In this case, I think it would be nice to maybe bring the temperature more toward the blue side. For an example, to really bring it out. So another thing that I would do, let's see here, bring to 200. How do you get to that one?
Oh, well, you cropped it already. So
I wanted to get the eyeball of the bird. Okay. So as you can see these little red dots here, that means we're clipping the white side. So we're going to bring that expose or the highlights down just a bit. Oh, we're on the background. Okay, I'm going to go back to the bird. And also you can name these masks, which I should have done. So mask number 2 is the background. You can just type in. Anyway. Okay, so now if I wanted to make any changes, I could do that. So for mask 1, bird. But what I wanted, and then you could just put bird. That way, if you wanted to come back later, you'd remember which mask you'd be impacting. I'm going to create a new mask this time. I'm going to use the radio gradient. Are we unstable? So the radio gradient allows you to do ovals and circles and that sort of thing. What I wanted to do here was essentially bring the eye a little bit. So I'm going to bring the shadows up. Maybe not that much. Clarity. I'll use, now we're used to, the same controls we always use. We're just affecting the eye though. That's what makes it kind of cool. So you can kind of see the before and after we've done is essentially brought the detail in the shadows of the bird out, and also made the eye pop a little bit because it had a nice catch light in it I wanted to see. But anyway, you can go in here at any time and masks and make changes to them. So let's pick another one.
Hey, Rick, while you're doing that, when you first selected the bird, and see how you got the bird was selected as the subject, but you also got part of that branch. How would you deselect the branch?
Oh, that's easy. Let's see, let's go. Here we are in the bird. Good question, thank you. Okay, so I'm back on the bird subject. I'm gonna go ahead and, there it is. You're so used to your own computer. So you turn on the overlay so you can see what is selected. And like you said, this branch, maybe you didn't want to select it. So you come over here to subtract, hit subtract and hit brush. And then you can change the same parameters we went through about the brush and the size. Bringing the flow all the way up. And all you do essentially is brush that out. So now when we turn off the, turn off the overlay, we can see that the branch is not lit up. It's so we basically deselected that by using subtract. Does that answer your question? Is that good, John?
Perfect, thanks, that's awesome.
I'm gonna use the radio tool on this one. What I'm doing with the limited time is just kind of demonstrating some of the tools that I use. So you go in, hit this. Once, okay. And this time we're going to use the radio gradient. And the main subject in this, you could also try subject that, because I want to see if it's going to pick up the water as the main subject. You could also use luminance, which I haven't demonstrated. So that would be a good mask to try and start with. So luminance range, basically you have a little eyedropper and you pick luminance, meaning light or dark, shadow or light. In this case, we wanted to select the waterfall, so we're going to select it. And you see it did a pretty good job of selecting the waterfall, but it also got some of the rocks. So here's another case where we hit the subtract button, hit a brush, and get a larger brush for this one. And we're basically going to erase all of that out of our mask because we don't need it. Now you can see I made a boo-boo and I went too far over that waterfall. I did that on purpose because I want to demonstrate that all you have to do is hit the add button, hit brush, and you can bring that back. So we're going to turn that mask to overlay off. Okay. Trying to get down.
Oh, grab that little slider.
Isn't that funny?
You can move the mask thing out of the way too if it's taking up too much room.
Oh, yeah. You know, I'm used to a bigger screen. Yeah. That's what's going on. Okay, so I want to get to these. Okay, so it's funny when you're using somebody else's computer, you have to, even though it's, you have to learn it because you're so used to your own control. So what I'm doing is I'm only affecting the waterfall. A few things here that I think I'll subtract these out. Must be one of those days we're getting an unstable connection here too. But so far, is everybody reading me okay?
Yes, you're rock solid connection to me, Rick.
Okay.
Yeah. Excellent
okay.
here too.
Okay, good. So you can see that all that red, that means I've overexposed it. So what we want to, you don't want to have that in a waterfall. What you want to do is quite the opposite. You bring your highlights all the way down and exposure down a little bit. Oh, my whites are too high. A good trick when you're using whites and blacks is if you move your white to the right and your black to the left, it actually adds contrast. Bring the shadows up. Okay, we're too low there. Okay. Here's my clarity and dehaze. So we're going to add some clarity, some dehaze. And so this is an example where we used the radio tool to essentially make the water pop. So now the water was it looked good, but now we kind of really brought it out. And you could keep playing with this. Maybe go a little further, bring the exposure up a bit. So that's an example of using a radio filter. And that's the beauty of these selection tools is you're only impacting the part of the photograph that you want to impact. So let's go, here's one of Yosemite, half dome. Okay, so on this, it was a very clear day. There was a storm, it had already cleared. There was a little bit of mist left right here. So on this one, I wanted to maybe improve the sky color a bit because it's kind of blah. And also since you have orange on half dome, if I improve the sky color, they're kind of opposite or complementary colors. And so let's see what happens. Let's go ahead and select the sky. Working. And, it did a nice job, guys. So I'm okay with that. So all I wanted to really do here, I'm turning the overlay off, is grab the temperature slider and I'm going to bring it more toward the blue side. Just ever so slightly. Don't want to make a huge big deal about it. Just help it out a little bit. So I'm going to create a new mask because I want to take that forest down below and maybe bring out some of those shadows. So I could use a luminance mask. Actually, really, any of these masks could use. I'm going to go with the linear gradient, and we're going to come up from the bottom. We don't want So I'm going to get as much as I can and hit the subtract brush. Okay. Come on, baby. Oh, here we are. Okay, so I want to subtract brush. And this one, I'm going to bring the flow down and the density on my brush because I don't want a really hard edge. What I want to do is just subtract a little bit of this out because it's starting to infiltrate into the mountain a bit. Bring my flow up. See, I'm just kind of erasing a little bit of that mask. And let's go down here. And so I'm going to take those shadows and bring them all the way up. Make a little exposure. I just want to have a little bit of a look in some of the detail to give it an overall good image. Also, I'm going to maybe cool the temperature down on the forest a bit. That's an example of that. Now you could actually turn your selection tools off and do some major or some overall global adjustments if you wanted to at this point. Maybe do something on the curve. Gives it a little more contrast. So here's a case where I only really simple stuff. I just wanted to make the sky a little more attractive. Maybe one more thing I would do here is grab a radio filter. Create new mask, radio gradient. And so there was this little beam of light right here. I'm going to try and bring it out just a little bit. Bring my feathering all the way up. Just like that. So just make it pop just a tiny bit to give it some interest. Kind of like the third element. That's that one. Let's look at it before and after. So it just gave it a little bit more presence. It brought some of the detail out of the shadows, made it overall a little more enjoyable photo to look at. How are we doing with time?
1:39.
Okay, we can do a few more.
And David doesn't start till 2, so you could take up until pretty close to 2 if you'd like, Rick.
Well, yeah.
And I'm okay if you run over, Rick. It's not a problem for me.
Okay. I think we'll be okay. At this, I've gone through a few photos. Have I covered the details of each of the brushes enough for everybody? I mean, are there any questions we could take? I'm happy taking a little breather here.
That dropper, selection, I want to see you use that.
Okay. Okay. That appears in 2 different brushes. One is the color brush and one is the luminance brush. So let's do luminance. So here we have, this is near Zion, or actually it's in Zion. And what I wanted to do was to bring out this tree. I mean, it's in this wonderful, beautiful amphitheater, but I think it would really look if it was just kind of isolated as a subject, so to speak. So I would probably pick the subject, but I can also pick color, because if I look around, there's really no other colors that compete with that the computer would try and pick all those colors. So let's do that. So again, you're going to add new mask. And I'm going to go to the color range. So the color range allows you with an eyedropper to select 5 different points to make sure you're getting, it's basically 5 different samples so that it kind of does an average for you. So I'm gonna focus with the color range on the tree. So I go 1, I'm looking for, that obviously didn't work. Let me turn that overlay off for now. Here's a little bit darker one, a little bit lighter one. So it gives you 5 selections. So obviously there's some of that color must be appearing in some of these rocks and stuff. I thought it did a really nice job of selecting the tree, so I'm good with that. What I'm going to do is track brush. Probably going to use a pretty good sized brush because I'm basically, let's bring this all the way up, bringing my flow and my density all the way up. And because I want to try and get rid of this script. See, basically erasing what I don't want to be impacted by my adjustments. And this is the color range using the eyedropper. Okay. You know, when you're at home and you have a little more time, you're going to take a little more, be a little more delicate about it than I'm being right now, but for just to demonstrate what we're doing. Okay. Go up. And if you have your own on, it's fine. As soon as you hit any of the adjustment tools, it'll go away. So exposure ever so slightly. I'm going to bring the shadows up. Again, trying just to give it a little bit of brightness. Bring my whites up and my blacks down to give it a little bit of contrast. And look, typically on most of my photographs, I'm going to put clarity and texture, so we're in the 15 to 20% range. And texture, usually about 10. So if we go up to the mask, and again, the eyeball over here, and see, it did a nice job of really bringing out colors and making it much brighter and more of a feature. In this case, I think that I'd love to see a little more detail in this canyon. And so that was the color. You can also use the luminance brush, which also uses an eyedropper. So we'll try that brush. Create new mask, luminance range. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to some of the darker areas in here. Now the luminance eyedropper only allows you 1 sample selection. There it is. You know, I'm happy with that. It looked like it got exactly the dark. What I did was select for dark versus light. And so that's my selection, which I'm happy with. You can also, you have some fine tuning. Yes.
Reminder, your electric service.
If that's PG&E, I have some words for them.
I swear I paid my bill.
I paid it twice at least. Anyway, these little arrows here allow you to kind of fine tune your selection. To make it wider, smaller. I'm kind of liking that for my selection. So in this case, the shadows were really dark, so I'm sliding my slider of my shadows over. I'm going to do a little bit of exposure adjustment. It's too much. You know, sometimes with this mask, I've been happy with how it looks. And this was the luminance. Sometimes in the darks, the shadows, it doesn't do a good job. This is a case where this selection tool didn't work. As I bring up my exposure, you can see how it looks really kind of funky. So what I'm going to do with that mask is eliminate it just by deleting it. And instead, I'm going to pick a different selection tool. Oh, come on. Create mask. And I'm going to use so I could use a radial gradient. I'm going to go with linear. And then what I'm going to do is pull that linear gradient from this side. So now when I bring my exposures up, that's much more natural than that other one did. It's a little bright here on the left side. So what I'm going to do is subtract a little bit out of that. Here we are, subtract, brush, turn the overlay on. So I'm going to not let it really, this was really bright over here, so I was kind of blowing it out by bringing in the other parts that were of interest. I don't really want to impact this part here either, near the tree. So let's see what happens now. Again, this is what's fun about this is you experiment and then find which brushes are going to work for you or not work for you. The luminance one works best if you're trying to adjust lighter areas rather than shadows. I think they need to do a little more work on that one. Okay, I think I can add a little drama through some clarity. Dehaze. So we have a little bit of clipping here. It's not an important part of the picture, so I'm just going to clip it out. Okay, let's look at the before and after. So what we've done here is we've given the tree a little bit more definition, so it becomes elements in the composition. Plus, we brought out some of the shadows and detail of the background in that nice amphitheater there. Okay, let's go to one that's going to be difficult, because it can't all be easy. This was actually Zion, and this was actually 2 exposures. I had one I exposed for the sky and the mountains, and then the second exposure was for the foreground. What I decided to do with this was just see what we could do with the exposures. So typically I would do multiple exposures and blend them in Photoshop or something, or even HDR. But I thought, well, let's see what we can do. So for this one, does anybody know what gradient or which selection tool they would use? What would you use, John?
I think I would first start with the brush tool and get the foreground.
Okay. What if we started with that? That definitely will work. You want to try that? I have a different method in mind, but let's try your method.
Oh.
I would have used the linear gradient and then adjusted for it by plus or minus. But
Good, do that because I try that and I'm always very bad at linear.
Okay, here's linear. We're going all the way up here. Okay, so we need to make some adjustments. You can see it's bleeding into here, and then it's not enough of it here. So let's go subtract first. Subtract brush. I have my flow all the way up, my feathering's all the way up, and the only thing I'm going to adjust is my size down a little bit because I can see that it's kind of bleeding in here. You can see now that I'm erasing it. Get some of that green in there. And guys, these are not hard concepts. It just takes a little practice. 10 days ago, this wasn't even available. Well, it was, but not to this degree. Now I'm going to hit the add brush. And if you look at my brush, let me make the size. You can see the brush has a plus in the center that you're adding. When you're subtracting, it will have a minus in the center. That's how you know if you're using the right brush. You'll find out too when you try and make an adjustment. So there's a thing here called auto mask right here. What that allows you to do is you can get pretty close to about where your plus sign is, and it'll most of the time detect where that edge is. Now here's a case where this wasn't necessarily a good choice of flow. And the main reason is you're going from a very dense linear gradient to really light. So I'm going to undo that update. And so here's what I would do in this case. And they're all different. Where did it go? Here it is. I'm going to get a new brush. No. That's not what you want to do, Rick. There it is. Add brush. I'm going to bring the flow entity down. And the reason is because if I had it up like it was, it's going to be this really dark green color. And I want it to kind of match what's the color that's there. Because it's masking, but it's a grade in mine. So maybe that this masking here might be half of the masking here, which is 100%. But that's now. Okay, so we're going to take those shadows all the way up. We're going to bring the exposure up. And looky there, there's something there. Another thing I would do, as long as I have it here up, is maybe play around with the colors a little bit. Let's see what we got. Go, that's too blue. That's kind of yellow. I kind of liked where it was. What I would want to do here is I can add another gradient, or I can use a brush tool right in here to bring that in even more. So in this case, John's right. We're going to use the brush tool for this one. So create new mask, brush. And let's see. In this case, we're going to want to have a pretty strong brush. I lost my brush controls. Oh, there they are. So I want a little stronger, 100% density and flow, because I'm not competing with that selection we had before where dark to light. So let's bring the size up just a little bit. And auto mask is on, so we're going to try and hit that edge. And it's doing a pretty good job. Not great, but good enough for this demo. And when you're at home, you know, you'd take a bit more time in doing this masking than I'm doing. Okay, exposure. I probably would just want to bring up the shadows a bit. Exposure is too much. Just want to kind of give it just a little bit of a hint. See that little bit of casting there? Makes that really easy. So bring that up by going down to clarity and dehazing will take care of that pretty well. So there you go. I could do more. I could maybe define these mountains a little more with some, but you know, I think you're kind of getting the idea. So let's look at the before and after. So it's quite a change. I think is everybody familiar with the HSL in Lightroom?
No.
All right, let's do that. So that's not a selection. It's in the mains. So you go down. HSL means hue, saturation, luminance. This is a perfect one for luminance in the green, because the greens are kind of dull and they can be brought out a little bit. So you hit the luminance button, take your greens, kind of bring them up. Helps a little bit. And I noticed there's some grays or purples in here too, so we could do that. So we're just trying to define them even just a bit more. And so you can go to saturation if you like these, the sunrise on these mountains, you could bring that orange up.
So yeah, what are the definitions for the, so you're selecting the entire picture because you don't have something selected, and hue, saturation, and luminance. So what do each of those do?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Now we're back to the global adjustment. So we're adjusting the entire image. However, with HSL, you can do local adjustments by luminance. Luminance being light and shadow or dark. For instance, let's say I'm on the luminance tab, you click on that, and there's a lot of orange and yellow here. If I took that orange all the way up, it'd really blow it out. So this essentially is a selection tool, but it's in the main menu.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, and saturation, wanted to bring up the blue just a little bit.
So Rick, I'm just giving you a time check. You're doing fine, but it's about 4 minutes to 2. So it's between you and David.
Oh, holy smoke. Let's do something. If you guys haven't seen this in February at Yosemite, you really need to go over there and do that. This is the famous firefall that comes in February. This is an example of the sky is really kind of blown out, not there. But I do see an artifact I want to get rid of. So I'm hitting the heal tool to heal it. Bring my brush size up. And right here, I see some things I need to get rid of. It looks like a branch or something. So let's just go one more time to the select sky. Because I think there might be some clouds hidden in there. So we're going to take our highlights and bring them down. Yep, I'm starting to see some. Bring my whites up and my blacks down and my dehaze up. So you can change the colors of it. If you want to look more like a sunset, bring the temperature or that way. Wow. There's an example of your sky, making a few adjustments and really bringing out. So when you have a photograph and you're looking at your histogram, it's really to the right or left. My recommendation is get your exposure and your shadows and crank them all the way to see what you have to work with. Because and going both ways too. So you can see it really brought the sky out. I could improve on that, you know, and really make it come out. But in the sake of time, that's what we have to work with. But yeah, take your sliders, go all the way down, go all the way up. You know, see what you have to work with. I mean, this is where we're about where it was when I first started. Anyway, wish we had a little more time to go over examples. Kind of wanted to do my animal here, but I was going to show you how to make this water almost invisible, so it didn't have this blown out look to it.
So Rick, let me just check in.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Okay. I just want, if you get something like this and you have this kind of thing going on, here's a case where the luminance filter will help you. So we're going to select for luminance range. I have my eyedropper. I'm going to go for the widest area right there. So now you can bring your range in. It's also collecting, I noticed that the light on the butt of this animal and ears. So we've selected for that. Now what we want to do is just bring those highlights down and bring the exposure down a bit. Probably a little too much on his butt. That's why I say the luminance one you got to be kind of careful with, because it can give you some funky results. So highlights. You can see how it's affecting the brightness of the water there. The whole purpose was just kind of to do that. It helped a bit. We could also go add a second filter to that, which would, in this case, create new mask, linear gradient, bring up from the bottom. So now I'm not affecting it anymore. I'm just affecting the water. Bring it down. There you go. So the main thing was the distraction of that water is kind of going back into the, it's not as much your attention. course, with something like this, we would probably do a pretty good cropping of it. Crop some of that water out. And might do something like that. And then if we had a little more time, I would bring out the animal plus make the background. You know, I might want to do that real quick. So I'm gonna, thanks for your patience, David. So I'm gonna create a new mask. I'm gonna select the subject. Which is the animal. Now, I'm gonna create a new mask, select subject again. I know it seems but this time I wanted to just do an invert and just select the background, which it did. So here's a case where you have a background that it's not really competing with the animal, but if you took your clarity slider and moved it all the way to the right, it makes it less defined. Left. The other, yeah, the other right. So that's kind of show the before and after on that one. See, it's less defined. In this case, if I had, I'd select the subject. Where is the MS3? And here I would probably make him a little more clear. There we go. So it kind of makes the animal pop, and then we reduce the distraction of the water, and we reduce the clarity in the background to make the focus be the animal. Okay, I'm good with that. Does anybody have questions, or was it perfectly clear as mud, or would you like to have me present this again sometime?
Oh, I think another go is always good. I learn something every time, Rick. These new controls look really very Photoshop-like. I love them. Yeah.
Right, in like easy Photoshop style.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the first time that they introduced the idea of masks and having layers within the masks, and actually being able to name them. It's certainly not as powerful as Photoshop, but they're definitely headed in that direction.
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Thank
Okay.
you for your perseverance today too. Yeah.
And everybody's patience. I appreciate that.
No.
Thank you so much. This was great.